What's your greatest, most satisfying, I effing called it moment? Keep finding cut up straws in my grandma's bathroom. So many straws. I let my grandmother know that someone is using her bathroom to use drugs. She freaks out saying I'm accusing her of using drugs and that it's impossible. A year later, my uncle divorces his wife due to her cocaine addiction. Grandma says, well, Kay always stopped by in the afternoon to use the restroom and then she would clean my whole house and I just didn't think anything of it. My favorite story at Thanksgiving. I don't care if they are up 28-3. They're the Falcons. They'll blow it somehow. Coworker made a very unethical behind closed doors deal with another company and he was an agency resource, not even a full employee of my company. After months, I spoke up about something being fishy and concerns of pre-committing purchasing, etc. My apathetic boss ignores me, all while coworker secures a job at the other company to work on the project that he set up with my company. Fast forward a year, now they are citing that project as a pre-commit for service. Wisdom never tasted so sour. A friend of mine got into a relationship with this girl. He tells me that she cries every time he tries to end their chat. I immediately think to myself, this isn't going to be good. She becomes incredibly controlling to the point of our crew only hearing from him once every few weeks. I mentioned how utterly effed it was to him, but he refused to believe that there was something wrong. Claimed he could persuade her otherwise. 2 years later, no sign of any of his progress. Was really sad to watch him slowly fade out of our lives in favor of her. Edit, just a quick rephrase for clarity. I was on a second date and we were watching Criminal Minds at her apartment. I called that the killer would be an archaeologist who hadn't even been introduced yet. She was so blown away during the reveal at the end of the episode that I took a victory lap. As I rounded third, I slipped where the carpet meets the hardwood and fell flat on my face. We've been married for over 2 years now. My wife was watching some TV show. I happened to walk in during some scene in which it was raining out and a guy and a gal were looking at each other through their car windows as their kid went from one car to the other. I said, "Here comes the scene where they make up," without knowing any of the background of the show. My wife starts telling me that it won't happen. They had had a failed relationship years earlier, hence the kid, and the woman was with a great guy. Right after she said that, the woman got out and ran to the guy's car, basically professing her love for him. Probably not the only one, but I was watching Seven for the first time and my mom was eagerly watching me as I reacted to the movie. She lost her crap when I said, "Is that Kevin Spacey?" during the phone call scene. She couldn't believe I recognized his voice and figured out who it was before the big reveal. I'm obviously not the only one to have guessed, but it was satisfying watching her reaction. Following a car with its left turn signal on for 2 miles, the driver kept slowing at side streets as if to make a left turn but didn't actually turn. I looked over at my daughter and said, "Watch, they'll make a right turn." Effing called it. Yes, they were still signaling left when they made the right turn. Ed. It's not it's. My sister is gay. Growing up, she'd develop what was very obviously, to me, a crush on different girls. In high school, I finally said, "Girl, have you considered that these feelings you have for so-and-so might be romantic?" She flipped the F out on me. We didn't talk for weeks. She'd date any guy that asked her out because she was supposed to like guys but never really felt anything for them. Finally, in college, she called me and went, "Yeah, so anyway, you're right. I'm totally gay." We joked that it took her so long not because she was in denial, she just didn't want me to be right. When my brother and sister-in-law planned a trip home for Easter weekend, I told my wife and parents that they were coming to announce their pregnancy. Everyone told me I was crazy and they just used the family chat for that. Cue Easter lunch on Saturday and my SIL refuses a glass of wine and everyone guesses she's pregnant. Called it. About halfway through Splice, when Dren has you-know-what with Adrian Brody, I said out loud to my friends, she's gonna morph into a male and are his wife. My friends were justifiably weirded out when that actually happened. Not sure if I can call it satisfying, but it's still a good one. In 2003, I wrote a thesis on mortgage-backed securities. The whole thing did not make sense to me and told my professor as much, but added, "What do I know? I'm just a student and Wall Street guys must know what they're doing." And then 2008 happened. My wife and I went to Red Lobster one day. My wife likes the shrimp and lobster pasta with Parmesan cheese. They sat her plate down. She got a weird look on her face. She told me it smelled weird. It smelled normal to me. I straight up asked her if she could be pregnant. Her eyes got wide and she started doing some math in her head. We went afterwards and got a pregnancy test. Sure enough, she didn't even know yet. All because I remember some random tidbit about food smelling off to pregnant women. Obviously not the most satisfying, but watching Family Feud and correctly calling the last answer makes me feel accomplished. There used to be a show called Tales from the Dark Side. I was watching it with my brother. The episode started with a female hiker who was lost and was taken in by an old couple. About 5 minutes into the episode, I said, "The old people are going to cook and eat the young lady." Brother thought I was crazy. End of the episode was the young lady in the hot tube, and old people were bringing it up to a boil and adding in vegetables and turning her into a soup. When a penny stock I bought for around 3 cents a share blew up to over $3, my only regret is not buying a lot more shares. Edit, for those asking, here's my take based on my very limited experience with penny stocks. You can usually buy penny stock through your typical broker. You must be particularly wary of penny stocks because they can be subject to the phenomenon of pump and dump. One or more people, likely those who have a stake in whatever company is offering penny stock, hype it up and hope that people will buy. As the price creeps up, those stakeholders may decide to sell and thus reap the rewards, while those who naively assume going long is best will hold on to that stock with hopes that it'll blow up. The number of penny stock failures I've invested in far outnumbers the successes. Like, I've bought hundreds of thousands of shares of stock less than 1 cent a share and seen it basically become valueless as the stakeholders have presumably sold their stake before the per-share price hits the toilet. It's extremely hit or miss, to say the least. One of the old coaches from the Chicago Bears is Mark Tretzman. I told everyone that he would not make it to the 3rd year of his contract. He would get fired after the 2nd season. I made a $500 bet with my dad because I was that damn sure. Soon as the news broke, I called him and told him I prefer cash over check. About a year after my father's death, my mother got together with a man. I felt as if something was off from the start and told her that he doesn't seem right and that he was going to do something stupid and hurt her emotionally. A year later, they got engaged, and they seemed happy. I've never seen my mother so happy since before my father died. Well, as of yesterday, it came out that this man has been engaged to someone else since before my mother met him, and that he has been sleeping with at least 2 other women on a regular basis. Wish I could tell her that I'd effing called it, but I'm afraid it will make her more upset. Anyways, now to build my revenge plan. Wish me luck. My mom and sister used to be obsessed with John and Kate plus 8, and I told them that they would end up getting divorced. When they announced the divorce, my mom and sister were devastated, but I couldn't help rubbing it in their faces. Boyfriend's best friend, let's call him John, started asking me for favors and texting me at odd hours of the night. Felt uneasy about John's actions and informed my boyfriend every time I was contacted as soon as it happened. I explained to my boyfriend that John was acting suspiciously and making me uncomfortable, but I couldn't pinpoint why. Cut to a month or so later, John claims I cheated on my boyfriend with John. I effing knew it. Disclaimer, I didn't do crap with John. Edit, a lot of people have asked the same question, so I figured I'd answer here. John has been demoted from best friend to no longer acknowledged person on Earth. I don't know why John did what he did, and I likely will never know. However, his actions were a reflection of who he is as a person and have very little to do with me. Boyfriend and I are still going strong. It's an honor and privilege to spend my days with my boyfriend. I had the jackpot by getting to be in a relationship with him, and I wouldn't risk it for anything. My company, MC, had a contract with a big Fortune 500 company, F5. I was headed to one of the departments, kept raising flags that the contact was at risk due to changing F5 policies. Was told not to worry about it. MC boss got distracted by and married a foreign stripper who lived across the country. Stopped paying attention to MC. He asked me to do a specific thing to cover up the internal problems we were having. I said, no disrespect meant, but I already tried that, it didn't work, and I'm not wasting time to try it again when I'm overworked as it was. Got fired for insubordination. Told MC good luck with the contact, they didn't have a chance without me. F5 company was furious. They cut the contact with the department I used to head 6 months early and with the entire company when it came up for renewal. MC has been through about 6 rounds of massive layoffs since then, and it's struggling to pay their bills. F5 company hired me directly for a $15,000 raise doing basically exactly the same job. I tried to warn MC. Caught up with a high school friend on a university campus. Pretty quiet guy, subtle, good looks, but never showed any interest in relationships. We were waiting for separate buses when he runs into one of his classmates and she joins us in the bus line. We were having pretty good conversation, but I saw her eyes repeatedly flickering over to his face. Soon after, my bus pulled up, so I smiled and waved goodbye to my friend and said to the girl, It was great meeting you. I'm sure I'll see you a lot more in the future." She looked puzzled, but smiled and waved back. They're in common law marriage now and getting officially married next week, and they've been valuable friends to my fiancé and I for the last 6 years. Had a friend who started dating a guy while she was in the middle of rehab for alcohol and drug abuse. Found out the guy was a former meth user. I told her she was going to end up in prison or worse if she didn't break up with him. She was on probation for multiple DUIs. Within 2 months, not only was she in prison, she was pregnant while in prison. This is my best and worst called it moment. I was sitting in biology class in high school when I heard sirens outside and looked outside the window to see an ambulance rushing past. I thought to myself, that's headed in the direction of my grandma's house, even though there was a plethora of other streets it could have turned on. Looking back, it was only even vaguely heading in that direction. I had the thought because my grandma had a heart attack a year prior. I got word a few hours later that it did in fact head to my grandparents' house, only it was for my aunt who was staying with them. She was murdered outside their house by her ex-boyfriend. I'm still not sure why I thought the ambulance was headed there, but being correct sucked. Drunkenly told my uncle's girlfriend she would be gone by Christmas at Thanksgiving. My uncle was a bit of a playboy and always had different semi-trashy women around. The best part is, I didn't even know I said it, 'cause alcoholism. I found out when my dad told me at Christmas she went into rehab and they broke up maybe a week before Christmas. Hey, you were right. About what? I once had a movie night with my best friend. She forced me to watch a romantic movie she loved and I wasn't in the mood. Anyway, we watched and after 5 or 10 minutes, the girl protagonist says to the boy, "Okay, we can hang out, but do not fall in love with me." Because I was peed, this kind of unnerved me and sounded somewhat suspicious. I rudely said, "I bet she has cancer." Well, my BFF looked at me with a disappointed glare, and as soon as half of the movie was over, I knew why. She actually had cancer. Guess I'm a fortune teller now. I still relish that I was right about this. That show, 19 Kids and Counting? Over Thanksgiving one year, 2 of my aunts got talking about it and were just raving about how amazing they thought it was and what a great family they had. I pretty much said something to the degree of, nope, that's not normal, those kids are essentially raising each other and I guarantee you that something is not right. They completely dismissed me, said I didn't know what I was talking about because I don't watch the show, etc. When the news eventually broke that one was molesting some of the others, I felt so vindicated. But my absolute favorite moment was the next Thanksgiving where at the dinner table I got to say, "So how about that Duger family, huh?" Dead silence from my aunts, but I had a crap-eating grin on my face from ear to ear. In Canada, we have a holiday called Family Day in February. In 2008, my wife was dealing with a sick family member out of town and had come back for a visit. We were trying to have a child at the time. Well, with our crazy schedules, we had one chance on Family Day. The moment we were done, I jumped up, gave her the double finger guns, first time in my life, and said, "Bam, you're pregnant, twin girls, red hair." Turns out I got everything right except the hair. Her Italian genes beat me in that one. I win for our entire marriage with that prediction. Edit. Thanks for my first gold. I want to brag to my wife I got gold, but I did not clear posting this with her. So conflicting. Gold versus living. It was New Year's Eve. We were about to do the firework, and me and my friend wanted to set up the box for the firework, just putting 4 bricks around it to keep it safe and start the firework. Then this girl came and said she was going to do it because she bought it. We told her how to do it and she said, "Nah, I'll just start it up." I told her, "Don't blame me when it tips over and starts shooting at us." She said it won't happen. That's exactly what happened. The firework just tipped over and started shooting at cars and people. I just calmly walked up to her and said, "I told you so." First week that my girlfriend started at an all-girls college, she gets hit on by this girl, H. GF plays it off, they're just friendly, blah blah blah. I told her, less than 30 days, she's gonna confess to you. Fast forward like 2 weeks, H invites GF over to her dorm to play some Xbox. My GF went over, totally ready to play some Left 4 Dead 2. H was totally ready to play around with my GF's lady bits. GF left feeling embarrassed and confused. A man can always tell when someone is flirting with their SO even when they can't. Not me, but 2 of my friends, M and D. Our other friend R got married to a woman he's been seeing for about 3 years. M and D were talking about it, and they agreed that R would go through a midlife crisis, leave his wife, and shack up with someone new after having kids. That was in 2008. 6 months ago, R texted me saying he'd left his wife and 2 kids and needed a place to crash. He's met someone else. I told M of this, and he uttered the words, "I called it!" I watched Saw 2 in the theater with some friends in high school. I hadn't seen the first one and didn't know anything about it. But about half an hour into the movie, I told my friend that Amanda was working with Jigsaw. They all said no way and told me that it wasn't possible, and I just didn't understand because I hadn't seen the first one. When the twist got revealed, they were glaring daggers at me, and I was giving them the biggest told-you-so smile I could. My little brother proposed to a girl he was only dating for a year. I told him to get a prenup. He declined. She left him a little more than a month after the wedding. He said, "Are you going to say I told you so?" And I got to say, I don't have to. When I met my mom's husband's adult kids, after a few minutes of hanging out with them, I followed my mom into the kitchen. Me, 3 of his 4 kids are gay? Mom, no, only 1 is. Me, no, 3 are. 10 years later, 1 of his children is in a same-sex marriage and 2 of his kids are living with longtime same-sex partners. Told my GF at the time that her best guy friend is into her. She kept saying she only saw him as her gay best friend and he only sees her as a sister. Well, she ended up cheating on me with him, and they started dating after I broke up with her. I like to think I won that argument. When my uncle was diagnosed as a narcissist by his marriage counselor, I'd literally been saying for years he has all the damn signs. Lack of empathy, lashing out when someone corrects him, 2-tier social system, an inability to see the world in shades of gray, an inability to see anything outside from his own perspective, etc., etc. I'd already let my mom and one of his sons know about my suspicions, so it was satisfying to be right. They had their time to come to terms with it and the ways his disorder caused them pain long before the rest of the family. Plus, it meant I wasn't scaring them with the disorder he didn't have. Back in March, I was driving home from lunch. I live in a place with snow during winter, and we had a decent snowfall followed by a warm day. Anyway, as I'm driving, some idiot turns in front of me with a 6-inch layer of snow on their roof. I wished with my whole heart that they would suffer consequences for their stupidity. Fast forward 5 minutes, and all the snow cascades down their windshield as they attempt to roll a stop sign. I relished pointing and laughing as I drove around them while they had to switch to park, get out of the vehicle, and try to brush off all the snow in a live lane. After breaking up with my first girlfriend, she rebounded with a very sketchy dude at her work. Within a month, he was living with her, and she had become a completely different person. I tried warning her she was being gaslit and manipulated. Her friends tried, but the dude had his teeth sunk in too deep. After 6 months, he dropped the act and made up an elaborate story about his mother, who he had previously said died of cancer, having faked her death and being alive in California. So he left for a week, at which point he stopped all contact with my ex. She panicked and came to me saying she was worried, and within days his entire construction fell like a house of cards. My ex was devastated, and I was too angry to be vindicated. I broke up with her, but still cared for her. I spent about 3 months following up with her and taking care of her until she was able to be on her own again. The events themselves were traumatic and awful, but the feeling I got from knowing I wasn't wrong about him, and that I proved to my ex she could still trust me and be my friend, was worth it. We are still best friends today. I correctly predicted that 2 friends of mine were going to get married before either of them had even met each other, as far as I know. They were both single and both had just taken teaching jobs that happened to be at the same school, and I thought to myself, yeah, that's gonna happen. Thanksgiving Day a year ago, not this past Thanksgiving, the one before. I was watching the parade on NBC, and when I saw Matt Lauer, I told my family I bet he would be the next high-level guy to fall to the Me Too movement. I've read Page Six for years, and there were stories hinting at his bad behavior for years. Sure enough, a couple days later, he was fired, no prior warning. It was a very satisfying moment. In 1999, I gave a talk in which I said, within about 3 years, more than half of the new internet-based companies will be bankrupt or merged. Buddy of mine was being a really bad effing man-whore, so I told him, hey man, I get that it's fun and all, but you need to slow the F down and not sleep with literally everything that throws themselves at his feet because he's gonna catch some crap. Sure enough, dude finds out he has chlamydia a few weeks after the fact, and I had my little, haha, told you so, dumb butt moment. The best part was after we were done talking about it, I said, well, glad you caught that. Wait, let me rephrase. Edit. My highest upvoted comment to date is about my buddy getting chlamydia. Not sure if I should share this information with him or not. Very topical. I saw Pro Jared and Holly Conrad walking around together on the show floor at PAX Unplugged this past November. I didn't think much of it because they were both there for a D&D podcast recording, I believe. I made a joke to my friend at the time about how wouldn't it be funny if they were hiding a secret relationship. My coworkers, Ben and Jill, had just started dating, and Valentine's was coming up. I asked Ben, "So did you book a romantic reservation for dinner?" He said, "Oh no, Jill said she didn't want to do that, so we're just going to do something casual." I said, "Dude, just book a reservation and then cancel it if you don't need it." He got a panicked look in his eyes and told me he would. After Valentine's, he told me, at the last minute, Jill admitted that she wanted to do something romantic. Thanks for the advice. They're married now, have beautiful kids. What can I say except, you're welcome. I went to the theater to watch a movie with some buddies one time. While waiting in line to get popcorn, I found 22 cents on the ground, and one buddy said, "When are you ever going to need 22 cents? I jokingly told him that one day he's going to wish he had 22 cents and he'll regret saying that. Sure enough, when we're paying for popcorn, that same buddy was exactly 22 cents short. I gave it to him in exchange for a popcorn tax. When I was in college, I became part of a new, larger social circle of geeks. It was quite lovely, but there was one guy that I just knew that there was something off about. I just got really bad vibes when he was around. I brought it up with a ton of other folks, and everyone said I was just being a judgmental bee and that he was a great guy. A few years after college, he was convicted of making and distributing CP. At the end of Captain America: The First Avenger, Red Skull is disintegrated by the Tesseract. I always had a weird feeling about how it was done, specifically because it looks almost exactly like the Bifrost magic. I always held that he wasn't disintegrated, but taken somewhere. Cut to Infinity War, turns out the Tesseract banished him to Vormir to be the keeper of the Soul Stone for all eternity. During opening night, while everyone was gasping, my single solitary voice involuntarily shouted, "I effing told you!" When the MMA fighter Ronda Rousey was undefeated and kicked the crap out of everybody, I called Holly home, knocking her out. I remember it like it was yesterday. I'm not sure if it was satisfying since I'm not a Red Sox, but in 2004, when they came back from behind to win Game 4 of the ALCS, being down 3-0 in the series, I said they were going to go all of the way. Figuring if they were ever going to break their curse, it would have to be in some grand fashion, not some boring way where they're just the best team and easily win it all. This is actually my brother, not me. He was in high school, probably around 14 to 15, and I was in middle school. We were with our mom at the car dealership getting her car's oil changed. It seemed to take forever back then, so it felt like we were there for hours. Meanwhile, the only thing to entertain ourselves was a TV in the waiting room, which was on the local news. Our state governor was doing some kind of press conference that afternoon, but this was before there was a ton of news online at the time, so we had no idea what it was about. My brother heard just the first bit and immediately said, "Oh, he's definitely having an affair." My mom was adamant that he was wrong. After easily an hour of weaseling around the issue, our governor announced his resignation because he had been caught having an affair and using taxpayer money to travel to his mistress in South America, I think. Still hilarious to me how well-tuned my brother's sleaze meter must have been, lol. And I'm sure it would be super obvious now to see the guy just talking in circles and trying to deflect blame, but at the time nobody could believe he would do something like that. When Obama reported that bin Laden had been killed, it was a Sunday at night. No one in Washington is working on a Sunday night. I thought, what could possibly be that important? There was a delay in the announcement as Congress was briefed. Had there been a crisis, they wouldn't have delayed. The only thing I could think of that would be that important was the death of bin Laden. My son's ankle pain. Several doctors and x-rays claimed it was nothing. One doctor even said he was lying about the pain to try and score drugs. Finally went to the ER on a Sunday night because he was inconsolable, writhing in pain. About 1 a.m. we were told to go home and get some sleep because we had an appointment 90 miles away at a children's oncology hospital at 9 a.m. That was 4 years ago. We're amputating the foot later this month. Urgent care clinics are destroying medical care. Watching Toy Story 3 for the first time, I just had a feeling that Lotso would be the villain. Ended up being right. Have a friend who had a crush on a guy, but she assumed he wanted nothing to do with her and that she wasn't even good for him. Told her she's the best thing to ever happen to him and that he should be on his knees begging for her to love him back. She didn't believe me. They're currently dating and they're both the happiest they've ever been. Wasn't satisfying, but it's my best prediction, so to speak. 1991, I'm in college. Smart kids are talking about the news, the hijacking of an airplane in Singapore. My comment, I don't understand why terrorists do stuff like this. It's such a time waster. They shouldn't be diverting a plane or kidnapping the crew and the passengers. They should take over the plane and fly it into the damn World Trade Center or something like that. Well, I have to admit, I was right on that. Flying a plane into the World Trade Center was a great way to bring attention to a terrorist group. The first Avengers movie, my husband was wondering why the staff could stop the almighty Tesseract. I casually said, maybe they're both Infinity Stones. He said, nah, the Tesseract is its own thing. Because he was more into the comics at the time, I shrugged it off. Since then, every MacGuffin in the movies, down to Thor's Dark World, I jokingly said, Infinity Stone, to troll him. You can imagine how peeved he's been since Guardians. When I was in high school, my family took a trip to Colorado. A good chunk of that trip was like a tour of major religious rights institutions. We went to the Focus on the Family headquarters, the Navigators headquarters, and the New Life Church, a megachurch in Colorado Springs led by a prominent figure named Ted Haggard. We were graced with Ted's presence that night, which was rare since he was usually out doing a speaking engagement and stuff. I did not like the vibe he was giving off. My parents were sort of fanboying out, which didn't help, and he just seemed schmaltzy. At one point during the service, they had a Q&A session. Someone asked him about Israel and Palestine. He requested that they turn the cameras off and answered, I hope Israel blows Palestine off the map. I mean, regardless of if you're pro-Israel, it felt crappy for a major religious figure to be advocating violence like that. So I was not a fan of Pastor Ted. Anyway, a few months later, it came out that he had quite the history with methamphetamines and male escorts. I couldn't stop smiling for days. Aunt bought a new Ford. I bet my cousin would crash it in a week. Guy made me $50 richer in 3 days. When my ex-husband was caught red-handed banging his best friend's fiancée. Oh, I'm sorry, I tried to tell you so you wouldn't have to find out that way, but I'm just a crazy bitter bee. Pro Jared being a creep. My brother had a girlfriend who was really effing crazy. They were both on and off for a long time, and on their last break, she came back 3 months later saying she was pregnant. Everyone believed it was my brother's baby except me, so for the next 6 months of the pregnancy, I doubted her, and everyone kept calling me insensitive and mean because I was open about my doubts. When the baby came out 6 months later, it reinforced my doubts because the baby came out brown with straight hair. Everyone in my family has really curly hair, so does my brother, and also, my brother is a real pale white guy. Even then, no one thought that maybe it wasn't his. So when the baby was almost a year old, they decided to do a paternity test, and guess what? It was not his baby. We were all in the living room at home when we got the news, and of course, being the gentleman that I am, I promptly stood up and threw it in everyone's face. My wife and I have lots of these. We are watching through Criminal Minds together and try to profile alongside the show and see if we can beat them to any of their realizations. I told you he was a first responder. Health insurance companies quadrupling in value in 1 decade after the ACA passed. Would have been infinitely more satisfying if I had any way to take advantage of it. Ask me again after the Game of Thrones finale. We got a neighbor on our street who just gave me a weird vibe, like something was off about him. I kept telling my family, who shrugged me off as judging a book by its cover. Well, about 2 months later, we get a letter in the mail from another neighbor who took it upon themselves to alert all parents. Turns out he was a child molester of a child under 14. Once I opened that letter, I went to them and said, I effing told you guys something was off about him. Guy still gives me the creeps when I see him. I'm on the airplane traveling home after seeing family, and I keep trying to throw up on landing. I looked at my husband that night and told him that I was pregnant. He was a little shocked that I'd think that since our other kid was 7 months old. I was exclusively nursing, and I would have only been about 2 weeks along at that point. A home test wouldn't have shown anything at that point, so I walked into the OB clinic and asked for a pregnancy test. They didn't believe me, but humored me regardless. Our second kid showed up 9 months later, and the nurse I talked to still couldn't believe that I was right so early in pregnancy. I've been practicing law in the same venue for many years with the same judges and attorneys. New hotshot attorney out of law school is opposing counsel. It's a death case. My client was not responsible, but opposing counsel would not listen to reason. On the eve of trial, my client is willing to offer a decent amount to settle the case. I call the attorney and encourage her to take it. I told her that if she didn't accept, when we went to trial the next day, I was going to have all her evidence thrown out and strike her witnesses. She thought I was bluffing. I assured her I was not. I told her to call any attorney in the area and asked them if I was a straight shooter. She basically told me to F off and that she's seen me at trial. Sure enough, the judge excludes her documentary evidence, all hearsay, and strikes her witnesses. She has zero evidence when the judge is through with her. Her client was in tears. I think she got sued for malpractice. She wasn't at that firm long after that debacle. But I effing told her that would happen. I was in Vegas in March of 2017 and had always dreamed of making a championship bet on my favorite team. I did, and everyone said I was burning $50. I still made it and figured I'd frame the losing ticket. The Eagles won the Super Bowl later that year. Oh boy, do I have a good story for this one. In college, I went to a theme park with my then boyfriend right before I moved away to California. We had decided to break up as he didn't want to do long distance, mostly his decision. He had driven us in his SUV. He had really bad eyesight and had just gotten brand new glasses. I believe they cost about $400. As we were going up the stairs in line for a roller coaster, I said, "Hey, why don't you give me your glasses and I'll stick them in my purse?" He said, "Nah, it'll be fine." And I said, "Are you sure? You're making a $400 bet where if you win, you just get to keep what you already have." And he said, "The forward momentum of the roller coaster will keep them on my face." So I thought, he's an adult, whatever. Literally, first drop of the roller coaster, I hear him yell over the roar of the wind, "Do you have my glasses?" So we spent the next hour walking around the base of the roller coaster looking for them and leaving a report at the Lost and Found booth. I then had to drive us home in his SUV, which I had never driven before. He had to attempt to navigate while practically blind. So, yeah, still pretty smug about that one. Coworker didn't like the new boss we had to transition under. From day one, coworker was openly being insubordinate, talking crap about new boss behind their back. But the thing that put it over the top for me was the day she came into our break room bragging that new boss had asked her to do something, and she handed new boss back a sticky note with a number of who to call in order to resolve the situation. Coworker was convinced she was invaluable and wouldn't be let go because all of our clients loved her so much. They don't. The worst part was that she hated new boss so much she brought the whole vibe of the workplace down to a hellhole. Every day there was something new to be about. We were all just venting receptacles to her. Even though I considered her a friend, I was quietly beginning to pray for the day our boss had had enough. I told my good friends that worked with us, "Yep, she's gonna get fired." And sure enough, a few months later, she was let go. When she told me, she called the office crying on the phone and I could barely muster an "I'm sorry" because I was so relieved that I wouldn't have to work with her anymore. Around 2002, a buddy and I were discussing cars. I predicted that in 5 years, Hyundai/Kia would be competitive with the domestic brands, and in 10 years, they'd be gunning for the Japanese automakers. When my wife's crazy sister was pregnant, I said we'd be the ones raising the baby one day. I was right. Her and her younger sister are our daughters now. Can I post the exact opposite of a called it moment that you all might appreciate? I used to skateboard quite a lot. I was semi-serious about it, but never got good enough to compete. A female friend of mine was dating this guy and kept talking about how good he was at skateboarding, like, "You have no idea how good he is," etc. In my head, I'm dismissing it, assuming that she doesn't know enough about skateboarding to assess how good he is. He's probably really mediocre and she just doesn't know it. Fast forward several years, I'm on the couch waiting for my brother to show up so we can go out. I turn on the TV and randomly start channel surfing. I flip to ESPN just in time to see that same dude competing in the X Games. He's literally one of the world's top skateboarders at this point. Whoops. I was talking to this girl and she had previously broken up with her ex, and I told her that her and him are going to date again. She denied it, of course. She said that her and him were over and never going to happen. I told her several times throughout 5 weeks that it will happen again. Each time she denied. Fast forward 3 weeks, they are dating again. I said called it, and now I'm an a-hole that she never wants to speak with again. I have successfully predicted 3 marriages would end due to cheating, and I called all 3 at the weddings themselves, basing my opinion on nothing but body language and how the couples interacted on their wedding day. 2 brides, 1 groom. All 3 ended up cheating and the marriages ended up ending. Being able to read body language / empathic, or whatever you want to call it, is a blessing and a curse sometimes. When I was younger, I was going to buy a TV. It was $350. My mom said to wait longer until my birthday. This was a week away, by the way. I said, "Mom, it'll go up." The next day, it went up $100 and she had to pay it. In very early January 2010, I was ripped and watched a Blackhawks game for the first time in a while, since they had been so bad during the mid-2000s that I just couldn't bear to watch it. Barely even halfway through the season for those who don't follow the sport too much. I don't know, I was super impressed and blown away. Got on Twitter after the game and was like, that's it, the Blackhawks are winning the Stanley Cup. It was the first time I ever felt that way since I started following them in the early 90s. 6 months later, they were skating the cup around the rink. The second time was me figuring out that they won that year because that's the year my kid was born. So when my second kid was born in 2013, I figured they had to win again. And they did. Found out my now ex-husband was sleeping with a coworker. So naturally we divorced, but still have to keep in contact because we have a daughter. Well, her fiancé finds out and leaves her as well. Now she is a decade older than me and had mentioned that she and her ex-fiancé had been trying for a baby for a long time but never conceived. He continued to see her and eventually she moved on with him. He didn't want any more kids. I told him to be careful because I suspected she was only with him to have a baby. Fast forward a year and she's pregnant. He comes to terms with it after being slightly upset. Fast forward a year after their baby was born and she breaks up with him. Shocker. How I Met Your Mother. I called the finale after the first episode. Mother has died and Ted ends up with Robin in real time. That the Steve-O-Kat Von D relationship seemed fake and wouldn't last very long. I was downvoted in r/movies for suggesting that they should add Ray Romano to the cast of The Irishman. A couple days later, it was announced he was added to the cast. My boy Raymond. Dude at work had been complaining about his crazy girlfriend and her problems. 2 weeks later, he is talking about how she is pregnant. In my head, I'm thinking, she's going to lose the baby because it isn't real. Sure enough, he comes in all sad about just over 2 more weeks later saying she had a miscarriage. Some time passed and he's complaining about her crazy antics again. Please leave your story in the comments. I would love to make a video on them in the future. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe.